My 2024 Senate prediction is not one that you've seen major channels do, but I have data to back it up. I can tell you guys, you are not expecting this. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Democrats' safe states. So we have Washington, California, Minnesota, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, New York, and Maine, putting the Democrats' safe states at 41. Now we're going to go to the Republican safe states. We have Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, Nebraska's special election, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Indiana, and West Virginia, putting the Republican safe states at 47. Before we continue, less than 3% of you all watching are subscribed. So if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. It really helps grow the channel. So let's get back into it. Now we're going to go to the likely states for each party. We're going to start off with the Republicans. I'm predicting that Nebraska is going to be a likely margin. If we look at the polling right now, Deb Fischer, who is a Republican incumbent, is only leading by 2.6% in the polling out of Nebraska. She is going up against independent Dan Osborne, and he actually has the Democratic endorsement in the race, so the Democrats are actually not even running a candidate. And Osborne is doing pretty well in the polling. We look at the last two polls, we see Osborne is up in both of them. But I don't think this is really going to be a close race, because if we look at the presidential polling, Trump still leads by 11 points in Nebraska. So for that reason, I do see this as a likely margin for the Republicans. The next state that I have as a likely margin is Texas. Now, if we look at the Texas polling, we see that Cruz only leads Colin Allred by 3.4%. Colin Allred has gotten a very good financing from Democratic donors, and that's really playing a big part into this closing race between Allred and Cruz. But if we look back at 2018, we see that in 2018, Ted Cruz only squeaked out a victory by 2.6%. But the reason why I have this as a likely margin is because of the presidential polling. Trump is leading Harris, according to the presidential polling, by 6.2%. I don't see a ton of Republicans splitting their ticket, and for that reason, I have Texas as a likely margin. The next state that I have as a likely margin for the Republicans is Florida. If we look at the polling in Florida, we actually see that the polling between Scott and Mukasey Powell has started to narrow in the past few weeks. It started at about 8.8%, and now it's all the way down to 4.1%. Scott is known for winning elections by very razor margins, but I do believe that he's gonna win by bigger margins, because if we look at the registrations in Florida, Republicans now outnumber Democrats by 1 million voters. That is a lot, and used to be swing state Florida. And also, if we look at the presidential polling, which I don't have on the screen right now, Trump does lead by more than how much Scott leads. And so for that reason, I have Florida as a likely margin for the Republicans. The last state that I have as a likely margin for the Republicans is Montana. Now, if we look at the polling out of Montana, we see that Tim Sheehy is leading right now by 4.3% against incumbent Senator Jon Tester. Now, Tim Sheehy has been getting some good outside spending in this race. Republicans have been outspending Democrats on the airwaves, and so because Tim Sheehy is in a very Republican state as of Montana, and because he's doing so well in the polling, I do see this as a likely margin for the GOP. So that finishes off our likely margins for the Republicans. Now it's time to go to the likely margins for the Democrats. The first state that I have as a likely margin is Virginia. Now, if we look at the Virginia polling right now, we see that Tim Kaine is leading by 12.9% against Hung Cao. We do also see that there have been outlier polls, like Kaine up by 20 points, which is definitely not going to happen in Virginia. But the reason why I have this as a likely margin is because of the presidential polling. Harris only leads Trump by 7.7%, and for that reason, I have this as a likely margin. The next state that I have as a likely margin is New Mexico. If we look at the New Mexico polling, we see that Martin Heinrich, the incumbent Democrat, is up 10.5 points against Nella Dominici. And people kind of thought that this could be a close race because Nella Dominici has name ID because she's the daughter of a prominent Republican figure in New Mexico. But according to the polling, Heinrich has been up by big margins. And for that reason, I have New Mexico as a likely margin for the Democrats. So that finishes off our likely margins for the Democrats. Now we're going to go to the lean margins for the Republicans. The first state that I have as a lean margin is Ohio. Now, if we look at the Ohio polling, we see that Sherrod Brown still leads by about 2.9%. But if we look at the individual polls, we see that this race has been tightening. Moreno actually was up in 2 polls by 2 points, respectively. And if we look at the outside spending in the state, we see that Republicans are really crushing it, according to outside spending, with about $110 million either for Bernie Moreno or against Sherrod Brown, compared to $57 million either for Sherrod Brown or against Bernie Moreno. And so you see that Republicans are really spending a ton of money in Ohio, and for that reason, I have Ohio as a lean margin for the Republicans. So that's actually the only state that's going to be a lean margin for the Republicans. Now we're going to go to the lean margin for the Democrats. The first state and the only state that's going to be a lean margin in my prediction is Arizona. Now, Republicans really did not do themselves a favor by nominating Kari Lake. Kari Lake has name ID, but that's kind of the problem because she has bad name ID in the state. Gallego actually leads Lake in the Senate polling average by 7.6%. Lake has not been having the momentum that she would need to win this state. And if we look actually at the polls, we see that the last poll has Gallego up by 13 points, which probably is not going to happen. But you see that the polling out of Arizona is already bad for Lake. But if it couldn't get worse, well, it just did. Ruben Gallego outraising Kari Lake by 3-1 as he pulls ahead. And so for that reason, I have this as a lean margin for the Democrats. So that finishes off our lean margins. Now we're going to go to our tilt margins. The first state that I have as a tilt margin is Michigan. And I actually have that as a tilt margin for the Republicans. If we look at Michigan polls, we do see that Alyssa Salkin does have a lead, but it is shrinking over Mike Rogers in new polls. And if we look at the outside spending in the state, Republicans are outspending Democrats in outside spending. And the reason why I have this as a tilt Republican state is because of 2020. We see that Biden won this state by about 150,000 votes, or 2.8%. But if we look at the Senate, we see that the Senate Democrat only won it by less than 100,000 votes, by only 1.7%. And because Republicans usually do outrun Trump in the state, I have this as a tilt margin for the Republicans. And now we're going to go to the tilt margins for the Democrats. So all of these states are going to be tilt margins, but we're going to take a deep dive into each of these states and why they are tilt margins for the Democrats. So we're going to start off with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is going to be a tilt margin for the Democrats. Bob Casey is a very popular incumbent, but his lead has been shrinking in new polls. The latest poll actually only has Casey up by 3 points in the state. And even though Republicans are outspending Democrats on the airways, I do believe just because of how popular Casey is in the state, I do believe he's going to win by a tilt margin. The next state that we have as a tilt state for the Democrats is Wisconsin. Now, if we look at the Wisconsin polls, we see that Baldwin is up by 2 points and 5 points, and right now she actually leads in the aggregate by 4.9%. Now, I don't believe that she's going to win by that big of a margin because I see Trump winning Wisconsin. Wisconsin was one of the narrowest states in the 2020 election, with Biden only winning the state by 20,000 votes. And for that reason, I have Wisconsin as a tilt margin for the Democrats. And the last state that I have as a tilt margin is Nevada. Now, if we look at the Nevada polling, it's kind of crazy. It has Rosen up by 9.3%. But we also see so many outlier polls like Rosen up by 16 points and 14 points, which is definitely not going to happen if you know anything about Nevada. And so, Rosen being up by this big margins, I really don't buy that. Because if you look at the presidential race, you see that Harris only leads Trump by 1 point in the state. In my latest forecast, I have Trump winning the state because it's a very right-trending state. And for that reason, I have Jackie Rosen only winning this by a tilt margin, slightly outrunning Harris in the state. But anyway, that would be a tilt margin for Jackie Rosen. So there you have it. According to my latest projection, Republicans would win 53 seats compared to Democrats 47. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. I put a lot of effort into this video and I would love to get 1,000 subscribers by this November. But again, thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.